If you look at the superhero movie genre today, it's pretty much dominated by Marvel, but it hasn't always been that way. Marvel didn't actually have a full feature-length movie until 1986, with the unsuccessful Howard the Duck. And that film was the first in a series of flops all the way up until Blade was released in 1998. DC, however, dominated the superhero genre throughout the 80s and 90s, and this began back in 1978 with Superman and the slogan, "You'll believe a man can fly." Nowadays, modern VFX can not only easily make us believe a man can fly, but it can also make us believe that he can do it whilst wearing a bulletproof metal suit and being attacked by fighter jets and missiles. Back in 1978, making the audience believe that a man could fly was a bold statement to make, and a complex and seamlessly impossible feat to accomplish. The special effects team began the process by testing numerous techniques. The first was shooting a model Superman out of an air cannon, but this method lacked controllability and natural movement. Next, they tried a radio-controlled flying model. This gave them control, but again lacked natural movement. Another technique was to have a model fly using wires, but this too had the same unnatural movement. So they tried out animation. This gave them the control and the movement they wanted, but they couldn't get a photoreal look, and so it always appeared cartoon-like. This test was just a stuntman in front of a projected image, and although it allowed them to composite any background image they wanted with the actor himself, the actor's movements and those of his cape were very limited. To try and solve the cape movement problem, they did tests using a model on wires and a large fan. These then evolved into stunt people lying on fiberglass trays that were either attached to a hydraulic gimbal or just a long arm with a counterweight in front of black velvet. In the end, the special effects team actually used a combination of all of these effects and some new ones to achieve the illusion of flight. For the majority of in-flight shots, front projection was used. Superman, or anyone who was supposed to be flying, was mounted on a fiberglass mold of their body and attached to a rig with a counterweighted arm. Behind them was a projection screen made from M3 Scotchlite. This material is capable of reflecting light back at close to 1,000 times its original intensity. In front of the camera was a two-way mirror set at 45 degrees. A projector set at 90 degrees from the camera would project the background footage onto the mirror, which in turn would reflect it onto the Scotchlite screen. The camera would then film both actors and the background through the transparent side of the two-way mirror. Unfortunately, this method meant that little or no movement could be given to the actors themselves, and so any movement they wanted in the shot had to be done by moving the camera around the actors or the footage on the background behind them. In order to achieve this, the filmmakers developed a lightweight front projection rig. The projector, camera and mirror are all mounted on one highly maneuverable rig. This meant that Christopher Reeve could remain horizontal whilst the background moved and revolved around him. In order to achieve this effect here of Superman racing towards the camera, Zoran Perisic placed synchronized zoom lenses in front of the projector and camera. As the camera zooms in, both Christopher and the background image on the screen become larger. However, at the same time, the lens on the projector is adjusted to make the background image even smaller, cancelling out the camera zoom and effectively leaving the background plate unchanged. Zoran named this process Zoran's Zoom Optical Flying Rig, or Zoran's Flying Rig for short. Now, I know what you're thinking. If he's lying on a stationary rig, how come his cape is moving? Well, this movement was achieved with a bit of wind from some fans and this clever device. A radio-controlled motor drives a camshaft that moves these wires that are attached to the cape, making it appear to flutter. The only drawback with this device is that, as you can see in this shot, the cape's movement is somewhat mechanical and repetitive. Oh, and that out in space his cape wouldn't actually move like that. Although the front projection technique worked well for most of the flying shots, it could not be used for when Superman had to fly in long arcs in front of the camera, or a greater depth range coming closer from a lot further away. For these shots, they had to use a blue screen. But how do you use a blue screen if your actor is also dressed in blue? Well, the special effects team had to come up with another ingenious solution. They got the costume department to make a Superman suit that wasn't blue, but turquoise. This then allowed them to photochemically remove the blue screen without affecting the suit. The plate could then be color graded to return the turquoise suit back to its original blue color. Unfortunately, neither of these techniques worked well when Superman had to take off or land on the physical set. So for these shots, he was put in a harness and attached to wires hanging from various different cranes, sometimes up to 200 feet tall. These wires had to be painted out in shots like this one, where you can see them against a light background. The difficult part was keeping the wires taut when they landed, because wires that weren't straight were very hard to trace. In an effort to avoid having to paint out the wires, Les Bowie came up with the idea of vibrating them. The theory was that because the filmmakers were running at 24 frames per second, if they were to vibrate the wires fast enough, the camera wouldn't be able to pick them up. However, to be able to get the wire to vibrate fast enough, they would have to use the thinnest piano wire they could. They began testing this technique with the burglar scene. In this scene, you can tell by the odd position of Superman's cape here, and the businessman's strange posture and red face. This shot actually used a tilt camera effect. Christopher Reeve was standing on the windows, and the stuntman playing the burglar was suspended on a travel rail by piano wires. Only the stuntman had the thinnest gauge piano wires with vibration because there was a risk that a sudden snag or jerk could break them. Unfortunately, during these tests, the travel rig jammed, jerking the wires and causing one to break. This spun the stuntman over onto his front. Then the other wire broke, sending him headfirst into the set floor. After this, they decided to abandon the wire vibration technique and paint them out instead. And you can just about see the wires in this still here. The innovation in the Superman film wasn't just limited to the flying effects though. Along with making us believe a man could fly, they also made us believe that he could run faster than a train by making a wire rig that could be lifted by a crane attached to a truck, that he could lift a car by using a similar method, that he was bulletproof, done by projecting the sparkling images onto a plate of Christopher using a 45-degree two-way mirror, and that Krypton was indeed a real planet. The movie Superman wasn't successful because its editing, filming, and effects were flawless. They weren't. Superman was successful because everyone involved, from costume designer to director, and from extra to lead, truly wanted to believe in the story they were trying to tell. And that meant we all did too.